Can we raise this idea that
Yes.
possibly Harry could be plotting a second book or a podcast? And I bring this up because, again, I keep going back to what he was talking about last week at the end of this court case. He said that people would be shocked by what's being held back because he had heard some private details that we didn't hear in court. But he was allowed to read some documents that haven't been made public. And he says his worst fears have been confirmed by the whole legal disclosure in the case, and it's really sad. He's free to talk about this stuff, possibly. He's free to bring out another book or speak about it on a podcast like Meghan's doing.
Yeah, well, the reason that some of those details were not read out in court was because it was a national part of national, security issues. That's why. But perhaps it was a bit of a veiled threat from Harry. I think there will be people asking the question that if he loses this case, is he going to throw his toys out the pram and publish or speak to a publication about some of that private stuff that we heard in court? And as you say, Matt, he says it would shock people. So that would be in one sense, is that going to be enough material for a book? He also said in the promotional interviews following the publication of Spare, his bombshell autobiography, that he had enough material for a second memoir. So is this going to come to fruition? I think Palace sources, but the Palace are going to be slightly concerned about that one. I think they are probably hoping, just going back to whether he's going to write a book or not, that Harry and Meghan's Californian dream is going to work out. Because if it doesn't, the only thing they've got to fall back on is selling more royal secrets. And I think that is a genuine concern.
I think as well, he's not going to let this one go, regardless of what the outcome of this is when we get the decision from the Court of Appeal. So whether or not it's a legal crusade, there will still be a moral crusade for Prince Harry. He said he wants to get under the bonnet and fix things, that although this has been exhausting and overwhelming, I don't think he's going to let it go. So he's going to have to find some kind of outlet for this, whether that's another book, whether it's a podcast, whether he tries to help others. I don't know, but I can't see him letting this one go.
I'm going to be a bit contrary here, but 5 years ago, Megxit happened, he's been over many, many times. He comes over for charity events. He comes over for the Invictus Games event at St Paul's. He comes in and out for the odd royal event, like funerals and coronations and stuff like that. Is he just going a bit over the top here? I mean, why is he obsessed with the security when for the last 5 years, as far as I'm aware, and I do trust the police, and I think there are police officers and there are people in the Home Office and royal household that are thinking, why doesn't he trust the fact that we can keep him safe under these current conditions? I mean, in the past 5 years, nothing bad's happened.
So the court has heard that when Prince Harry comes back to the UK, he has to give the Home Office 30 days notice for them to assess what kind of level of police protection he should be entitled to on that particular visit. In other words, a case-by-case basis. From Harry's point of view, the security is provided with on these occasions has not been adequate and has not been up to the standards that he would have had as a working member of the royal family. So, for example, there was an incident following a Well Child Family charity event a couple of years ago where he did not have a police escort, and he alleges...
Okay, I hate interrupting people, but that is the only incident that he's come up with, and that was something that the journalists turned up at, where it was photographers, and he appears to want armed police officers to deter journalists and photographers. That's the only case that we've heard.
Well, it goes back to his paranoia, doesn't it? Right. About what I think it all goes back to what happens with his mother in the tunnel in Paris in 1997. And clearly that would have been incredibly traumatic for him. But I just think it's not within his character to let these kind of things go. And I think, as you were saying, Sarah, I think that perhaps could be the issue.
And the point was being made by his team when he visited Ukraine that actually he had far the greater security, because he was accused of hypocrisy. Well, how can you go to Ukraine and suggest that you're not safe to bring your family back to Britain or visit Britain? And his team saying, well, actually, he had far greater security in Ukraine, and likewise when Harry and Meghan go to Colombia or Nigeria, for example, than he does when he comes to Britain. It comes down to the intelligence sharing, doesn't it? That he can pay for his own security team, but he can't receive the kind of threat level intelligence that he would have had when he was a working royal. And I think, he does have this bespoke system, 30 days notice, and then he gets it. But he and Meghan can't freely come without asking permission, bring the children back. He says he wants them to know their heritage in the UK.
I think you know my position on this. I say 5 years he's been coming back and forth. I speak to police officers that basically say nothing, we are professional police officers with all the intelligence, and if anything's that we think's going to happen that he could be in danger, we will put the we'll put things in process. But
His argument is that why is he being treated differently to others? He thinks he's been singled out, that he's being punished. And as you set out at the beginning, that he thinks that they are... You'll say that. I'm not going to necessarily say that. I mean, look, I think this bespoke system has worked until now. But there is an argument, as I pointed out earlier, that you could say, why should Liz Truss get it for her, brief term in office, when Harry, who was born a prince, is the son of the king and always will be, no matter where he lives, doesn't have that right. On the other hand, if you say to the taxpayer, you're going to be funding a guy who's decided to up sticks and live in Montecito and, while his wife is selling jam, well, who's going to pay for it? You're going to pay for it? That's not going to go down very well. And,
and we'll be paying for policing journalists sitting outside a charitable event, because that's the only case that he's made public.
Yeah, I mean, Harry did say he would have been happy to pay for the police protection, but he wasn't allowed because that would set a precedent for rich football billionaires to pay for Metropolitan Police protection as well. So it's not as if he hasn't tried, but I think it just does come down to this fundamental point that Prince Harry feels he cannot bring his family back to the UK because he says they are unsafe. I think perhaps the popularity ratings of Prince Harry and Meghan may have something to do with that as well. They see they perhaps are slightly more unpopular than other members of the royal family, and does that mean they're more of a target?
I just think it's an insult to everybody to imagine that he cannot bring his family back to the UK, which is a very safe country, because the fear of some kind of disaster happening. I just think it's really rude to us all. But,
and also, I think with a criticism of Prince Harry perhaps is he's been offered rooms to stay in Buckingham Palace in royal protected areas, and yet he chooses to stay in hotels which doesn't have automatic police protection.
Yep. There we go. Well, plenty for a second book then,
yeah.
or a Harry podcast to talk about all this. Right, there's many royals that I would like to take a hike. However, Princess of Wales has gone for a lovely walk in the Lake District. This is a video that was filmed a couple of weeks ago. It was earlier this year. It was a beautiful sunny day in the Lake District. She was on the shores, or near the shores, of Lake Windermere, which is a wonderful part of the world. And it was as part of her role as joint president of the Scouts. Cameron, you've been talking about this all week, I know, on television. So what did you make of this video?
It was very cinematic. It was a nod perhaps to the previous videos that the Princess of Wales has.
There is a theme, isn't there?
There is a theme, and it's all about sanctuary and nature. And if you remember the video she did when she announced that she is in remission from cancer, or completed her cancer journey, I should say, is that she has found sanctuary in nature. But now she's bringing it on to the next generation. She's been joint president of Scouts since 2020. And I think the whole point was her using her platform as the Princess of Wales to promote the cause of Scouts, which does get a lot of perhaps inner city kids out and about into nature, putting down their smartphones, giving them the life skills they need, etc. And then the princess, of course, is in a very privileged position. She moved her own family out of London to Windsor, so her own children, George, Charlotte and Louis, could have access to more outside space. So it's just a classic royal, publicity thing to shine a light on a charity.
I think it's something that she's been talking about for a long time, originally to do with her early years, the power of nature for children, but it's taken on a different perspective since her cancer diagnosis.
Really, yeah.
She talks about nature and its healing powers, and that she feels a real spiritual connection. And we've seen this repeatedly, as you talked about the video filmed in Norfolk when she announced the end of her chemotherapy. At World Cancer Day, she posted a picture of herself in the trees that was taken by Prince Louis. This Mother's Day, after the furore over last year's Mother's Day picture, actually, she talked about Mother Nature and celebrating Mother Nature. So I think we're seeing a real theme. And even June last year, when she talked about not being out of the woods yet, and we had that first official photograph of her since her cancer diagnosis, where she's standing under a tree and looking up into the sky, very much a clear theme, something that she's done through her work, but something that's deeply personal to her now.